a4, and that looks scary for white because the a5 pawn, that could be a huge asset.
So maybe queen c3 is what's required. Trade the a pawn for the a pawn, but then black gets a pass b pawn. That knight can jump to b2 and back around at an outpost that you mentioned. And so nice that black's king has this lovely, very safe, protected square on h7, waiting for it in the event of a back rank check.
And Hans has been up on time, but suddenly we're getting closer to clock equality, although now Hikaru's in for a big think, and he trades the queen. So Don, in end games, we typically like outermost pawns, but as you're pointing out, the knight coming to d6, the black knight can come to c3, but a5 will drop if that's the case.
That's exactly right. Maybe Hikaru, it's a very audacious move. He might want to sack the e-pawn at the right moment, break through with b5, and run his a-pawn down the board. That's a lot of pawns to give up, and even if white gives up the knight for black's a-pawn, that pawn avalanche as a result might be overwhelming.
Wow.
f5 by Hikaru. He wants knight c3 next.
And the knight can't get back around to protect the a4 pawn. So they don't know the evaluation. You all do, and so do we. But look at this. It's equal, but it's actually not that clear. The black king is sprinting to the center. Does white push the d pawn? No, it keeps it in place, and suddenly white's winning.
His white's pawns are going to mobilize. King to d5. White's going to go f3 and e4, and it's black's pawns that are further advanced. But look at this knight paralyzing them. You can't go b5. Here come white's pawns, pushing the king around like a plaything. And a g4 by Hans. Very patient. He's going to go e5 or d5 very shortly, right now.
But he might need to pick correctly, because sometimes you play e5 and the black king gets right back into the d5 square. But he can't play d5, but then the black knight gets back to c5.
So he plays neither.
Yeah, he brings his king back around. That knight is trapped. So Hikaru gives up a5, and he's hoping that he can just go after the white pawns, but I think with those double G pawns for both sides, I mean, that's one of the ugliest pawn structures you can see.
Oh my gosh.
In complete control here.
And finally, Hikaru gets one of his pawns moving. That knight is just jumping around, and it has had way too much coffee. And is it finally time to push d5? No.
He goes back because, king d3, so you're giving up the g3 pawn, but the knight's trapped there. King e3 to f3.
Oh my gosh, and Hikaru might have to give up his second pawn to extricate that poor knight.
It's not getting out.
It's still not going to get out. Knight f1, king e2, knight h2. I think he should try b3. But you can just, oh my gosh.
He wants to trade off all the pawns.
Great try. I've drawn so many of these positions. You don't know which pawn to stop with which piece, and you end up losing your only pawn.
And I'm looking at Hans here.
Oh my lands.
Oh, here's the g pawn.
And this is typical Hikaru. He's going to go g3. White's pieces are going to be tied down to stopping these passers. b3.
Oh, my goodness.
King sliding in. It's a draw.
It's like a split in bowling, right? You just can't get them all. The knight goes to g3. The king goes back to d5. And
he blundered. Oh, no. Is it a win?
Oh, look
How do you win?
Look at his face. He's really upset.
Oh, g1 queen.
G1 equals queen.
Oh, my gosh.
Hans blunders it right back, and he slaps his forehead. That game is a draw. Hikaru, he is fortunate. The crowd is going wild. But, Donovan, that was a